Hey everyone, I'm Jen. Welcome to Blockchain Banter DeFi Debates. Today I am joined by Joshua Baker, CEO of Aori, Dr. Mark Richardson, project lead at Bancor and Carbon DeFi, and Ceazor, creator of Ceazor Snack Sandwich. We're going to be talking a little bit about Ethereum or Ethereum's Dencun upgrade. Really just kind of curious, guys, not so much a debate, more of just a general discussion, what your overall view of this is. I see mixed feeling sentiment on my feed. What do you guys think, especially as, Caesar, I know that you are all over with L2s and things. I know you're on Base, you're on Phantom. Josh, Mark, what are your thoughts as project leaders, creators behind the scenes? Any volunteers to kind of start us off, maybe?
I guess I'll just reiterate really quickly what I was saying before we started recording, which is just I think you see people overreacting and saying this is like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then you see people underreacting and saying this means nothing. And I think it probably lies somewhere in the middle. It does mean effectively that roll-ups are going to be able to cut their gas substantially, but it doesn't address the core problem of gas on L1. And you have to use L1 at some point in the supply chain of a transaction. So I would say that's kind of the my kind of maybe my boring centrist Ethereum Foundation centrist answer. Mark, Caesar, jump in.
Yeah, I'll jump in here and add something to that. I don't really see it as like I obviously sometimes am stuck having to bridge to mainnet and then bridge to another L2 because that L2 doesn't have some support with the various third-party bridges and stuff like that. But for someone who's a normie, what do I see them doing? How do they get into crypto? How do they get on chain? They're going to go through via Binance or Coinbase or maybe even Kraken. But if they go through Kraken, they probably have to go down to mainnet. But Base is going to just let them go straight into Base chain. So they're not going to have to even touch mainnet. They can just live out in the suburbs of Base chain and then go to Optimism. They'll never have to go back down to mainnet unless they want to. So I think it's pretty fantastic. If they can lower the fees on L2s, that's a win. That's a big win for me. Whether it's going to completely change the game, no, but it's a definitely valuable upgrade in the fact that it can lower those fees even more and have these compete with these other L2s that are not rolling down onto Ethereum, right?
That's a good point.
I guess they're called L1s, right?
through Binance. Yeah, but you know what? That actually, I saw something this morning, and we have a call with Phantom tomorrow, but I saw the comparison there, and so it makes this upgrade makes them more competitive with Phantom now. Never mind after their upgrade. Without getting into the prices, it's a little bit more competitive. Mark, what is your thought on it?
I think that with a lot of things in the blockchain space, there's it's 99% marketing efforts and sort of 1% substance. What people need to realize, I think, about the Dencun upgrade is that it's very much a proof of concept. The idea behind it is still to move Ethereum towards a fully sharded system. And the thing that Dencun represents is what's called proto-dank sharding. And this is the first time that Ethereum has been capable of maintaining a transient storage system without having to commit it to the chain properly. And that is kind of the first let's say necessary component in demonstrating that a fully sharded Ethereum mainnet is even possible. So in that sense, it's a very big technical achievement. And I think that all of the developers that have been working on it should be applauded for what they've achieved here. The fact that it reduces fees on layer 2s is neither here nor there. That is let's say a happy coincidence, but I don't think it's really it's not really the reason for this thing to exist. This would have happened even if there were no layer 2s. It might not look exactly how it looks today, or it might not have been prioritized the same way, but this is still a necessary component in changing. I don't want it it's important to recognize like this is a very profound change in the way that the Ethereum blockchain is organized and what it can do. It's also worth pointing out, and we know this from several different sources, that you know, the ability to maintain data temporarily as a blob and refer to it also means that you can use you can do slightly more complicated transactions on Ethereum layer 1 where the gas would have been prohibitive, or where you wouldn't trust the data that's coming back. So for Uniswap v4, for example, this is actually one of the upgrades that it was contingent on. And the reason for that is because the hook mechanisms that they're going to be using requires passing data, out of the, requires passing a state essentially out of the contract. And then in order to trust the data that it comes back with, you need something to compare it to. And if you were having to write that to the chain every time, and it can be a lot of data, that would be like literally impossible. It would be so prohibitively expensive that no one would use it. So just the fact that you can have this kind of temporary storage, it does represent a significant infrastructure upgrade. And however you feel about the politics of it and how close Uniswap is to the Ethereum Foundation and in pushing this so that they could make that product work is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that Uniswap v4 is already designed to use that kind of functionality. They certainly got a head start on everyone in knowing how to use it and when it was going to be available, which again is referring to the politics that I was referring to before. But yeah, I don't see this as an upgrade that was implicitly or explicitly for the benefit of layer 2s. That was just a happy coincidence. It really is like the foundational layer into a properly sharded Ethereum system, but one which is already useful. You just have to be very clever to know how to use it immediately. So yeah, I'm happy that it makes things a lot cheaper on layer 2, and that is a very obvious use case for the new infrastructure. But there are things that you will be able to do on layer 1 now that would have been impossible without it. And so I do expect that we'll see slightly more complicated, smart contract systems developed specifically to use the blobs if you need to store a temporary state. And by temporary, it's not even that temporary. It's to 18 days that you can store that data for. So it is like a very nice feature to have, where you can keep data, locally without having to pay for it. Which, before the upgrade, you had to pay for literally everything that was ever saved to the chain. And that was the only way to reference a previous state. So it's it's weird because in any other computer system, the ability to store data for a little bit longer and not have to pay for it seems like a trivial upgrade. But in a blockchain situation, it really that's a profound achievement. And so yeah, I'm bullish on what it means. I don't think that it's going to have relevance immediately. Like I said, it's like the word proto in there sort of alludes to the fact that this is a first attempt. It's they're still sort of digging out the basement for what the building is going to be that's built on top of it. But it's still nice to see them break ground for the first time.
Maybe we can kind of simplify what are blobs and how do they work. Someone who's more knowledgeable about it than me. I've only really heard just that the blobs are coming and that they will do what they will do, but not so much how do they work.
A blob is just is just raw data. So it's it's a computer science term. This isn't something that's invented by blockchains or for blockchains or something. But yeah, it's just a bunch of data that you might need to refer to later. And so just speaking broadly on a blockchain, usually what would happen is if you need to refer back to data for some future use case, then that would be saved, to the blockchain. And if it's a lot of data, you'd have to pay a lot of gas for it, and it would be saved there forever. And we know that this is, that this should be uncontroversial to anyone who's been in blockchains for a long time, that, you can maintain a historic node or whatever, and go back and access every single thing that's ever happened on a blockchain. Blobs do not work that way. Blobs, because they're not saved to the blockchain, you don't have to pay the gas to write them, which is how layer 2s are benefiting from this. So it's kept in what's called transient storage, I think for 18 days. And you can put an enormous amount of data there. And after 18 days, it expires and gets overwritten. And so as long as you don't need to, refer back to that thing a year from now, you can use it for things. In the case of hooks on AMMs and other things, this could be something that you only need to hold on to for like a block or two, where where you're passing data outside, out of the smart contract, and then in the next block, the smart contract won't know what that data is anymore because it wasn't saved. But now it's contained in that blob. So when the hook finishes its work and has to come back, you can actually refer back to the blob to make sure that the data that's being passed back is commensurate with the whatever was sent back. Because the problem, and one of the general attack vectors with hooks, in which blobs don't necessarily completely solve, but they definitely go a long way to addressing 99% of the issues, is that you have to trust the data when it comes back from the hook. And so in a conventional blockchain environment, that would generally mean that you would need to complete that entire process in a single block, and hold the data in memory, sort of like a flash loan, so that that everything is fine. But with a blob, it doesn't matter, right? Because you've got like 18 days and you can come back and compare the state then before the whole transaction completes. But yeah, so a blob is just any data that you might want to use again later, but you don't necessarily need to save to the blockchain forever.
So in reference to the L2s, would it be safe to say that with the blobs, they only need to write their ledger down to Ethereum every 18 days?
Well, no, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Josh. I've spoken too much already.
Nah, you're good. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just saying, yeah, I think we were gonna say the same thing. No, you still write all the transactions. It's just that you know how normally with like optimistic rollups you have 14 days to contest a transaction that you think was fraudulent, or like a proof that you think was fraudulent. Now it means you have 18 days to contest any data that they post that might be fraudulent, for example. And so they're still posting transactions every, 15 minutes or N number of blocks like they normally are. It's just that like it's a rolling like 18-day expiry for the 18 days ago, and then 17 days and 45 minutes, like it's just you still keep having to post every 15 minutes. But it makes it way cheaper. So I saw ZK Sync today that their cost of like writing call data, turning it to blobs, cut their cost per block from like 0.11 ETH to 0.015 ETH, I believe. So it's about an 80% reduction for them. For
significant.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that just increased their margins by that much more. So
I have a question for you, and I'm trying to be conscious of time here. So when I know you have to, jump off.
No,
just let me know.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, Mark was saying that this is something like obviously future, thinking ahead, this is something that will, significantly impact Ethereum more so than it is today as opposed to the L2s. But, you can still take advantage of this upgrade. It still does offer these things that we were just speaking about. Is this something that like at your average, not your average, I don't want to downplay AORI or Carbon DeFi or Bancor, you know what I'm saying? Like like Mark said, Uniswap kind of had this heads up, if you will, as to what this is. But is this something that we'll see other DeFi protocols taking advantage of? Is it exclusive to these hooks sort of thing? Mark, I know Carbon DeFi has this native to the project, right? But
yeah,
well,
the application to hooks, like I'll let Mark jump in more on. But like the application to like how DeFi apps can use it is it'll make their UX who's substantially better right now. This will have applications like Mark for future upgrades. Like this is like the V0.1 of like, the fully dank sharded future of Ethereum. I even think like dank sharding is only like one step in the process. I think based sequencing will probably be like the penultimate process. But yeah, I think this short term, the effects it'll have on like apps, like especially like Carbon and Aori, is going to be like all of our L2 experiences now are like 25 times better, for example, because you're on Arbitrum, like we're still seeing gas fees of like $1.50, which was like unheard of, like a year ago, and now this will drive Arbitrum probably to sub 15-25 cents, so you're going to start to see that get much better. It's really hard without a lot of custom engineering for Adapt to actually like use blob call data or use blob data in like any meaningful sense. Like you'd have to get really creative with like how you're using it. I mean, outside of like things like hooks, but like Mark can touch on too. But I just mean like for like generic applications. Yeah.
So you'll see more of the effect on Arbitrum. Yeah.
Yeah, on any L2. Yeah.
Right. But you're strictly on Arbitrum though at the moment, right? As far as L2s.
Oh, Aori sorry.
Aori's mainnet.
Yeah, we're mainnet and Arbitrum, but we're being
Arbitrum.
We're being sneaky about it. Yeah, the UI publicly is not live, but we have some things going on, some B2B integrations. We'll be public about soon. No, you're good. But yeah, we actually deployed Create 3 on like 100, or I mean an additional 50 chains to put it over the 100 mark. So we're fully chain agnostic soon. Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Yeah,
outside of the call, I won't spread the word if it's still kind of hush. Mark, really quickly, you mentioned the hooks, it's like specifically to Uni V4.
Yeah. So
I guess I have the same question for you,
Yes, there will be there will be protocols that are going to take advantage of it. Obviously, there'll be protocols that are designed specifically to take advantage of it, like Uniswap V4. So yeah, on the hook side of things, let me just walk you through that. Imagine that so with a hook, you pass it information, and then it passes information back. Essentially, that's how it works. Right? So there's going to be a bunch of different smart contract calls that are all happening. And so one of the easiest exploit vectors is to just call the hook and then provide the information back to Uniswap yourself, and ignore the information that the other smart contracts provided. So if someone says, process this, execute this transaction or something at this certain time or whatever it happens to be, the hook will say, okay, fine, here's some information, and it will give it to a smart contract, and then that goes out to a bunch of other smart contracts, and then the information comes back. If that contract then turned around and said, fine, you owe me $4 million, Uniswap would just be like, okay, here's $4 million. Like, that's what the smart contract says to do. Even if those other smart contracts and the process that it was supposed to be a part of didn't say that, maybe it just says, Uniswap owes you $10. And so how does Uniswap verify that? Imagine that, someone sends you an email with an invoice saying, we delivered you, 100 bars of gold, you owe us this amount of money. What are the things that you would do to check whether or not you actually owe that person money? You might check, call someone up who was supposed to, deliver those gold bars to, and make sure that they received it. You would have other sources of information to confirm whether or not this invoice is legitimate. And in a smart contract infrastructure, this is extremely important because it will just execute, whether or not, the verification process is implicit, I think is what I'm trying to say. So
sorry, Mark. Yeah, have a great one, guys. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. So the the process there is either you just trust whatever someone comes back with, which is a really bad idea because, like I said, they can just say anything and the smart contract will just honor it. Or you have to store the state and then compare the information that the hook comes back with before committing to that transaction. And that's a problem before the Dencun upgrade, because you would have to store that entire state somewhere on the chain, which is extremely expensive. After Dencun, you can just store it as a blob. And so when the when the person comes back with saying you owe me $10 million, you can just check to see in the blob whether or not that makes sense by having a look at the state that you previously stored.
Can I jump in here? Just a quick question. You would have to store it as a blob, or can you add to the blob? Like, is it like a read and write thing?
Yeah, the blob can be overwritten as well. And that's like one of the ways that these hooks will operate, is that the data that is stored in there will be constantly overwritten, which gives it, another 18-day lead. So yeah, that's the whole point of this, is that the data in the blob is mutable, meaning that you can actually store a relatively complicated state and update it over time. But even though it's kind of living there, constantly being updated, you never have to pay for it to be committed to the blockchain.
I see. Yeah.
Mark, do you want to continue? Because I do have a question about this.
I think that's all I wanted to say about hooks necessarily. But you can see that that's just an example, and one that we know
let's talk
is
about
going to be
Carbon
used.
DeFi as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that you are looking to take advantage of this upgrade for Carbon DeFi?
Well, okay. For there are applications that I can see that would make sense. But Carbon DeFi is built to be like data minimalist. And so it is very comfortable living entirely on the system state, and it doesn't really need blobs to operate. Like I've said before, I think that there's good defensive programming practices and there's lazy programming practices. When your system is getting to the level of complexity where it really needs to make a blob, it's not necessarily, it's a step too far to call it lazy, because it's extremely difficult. But what I mean is that there's always a third solution. And if you can find an elegant enough implementation that doesn't rely on blobs, that's still better. And in Carbon DeFi lives in that world. So we have no immediate applications for blobs because the system is so beautifully elegant, and there's just we just have no need for that kind of functionality. But you could imagine if people wanted to build additional utilities on top of it, things that I as a project I refuse to take part in, but I know that there's a huge appetite for it in the market. Things like stop losses and other trading utilities that people seem to enjoy. That kind of thing would be very difficult to maintain on the blockchain proper. But potentially could be made a little bit more feasible if the data didn't have to be stored permanently and instead was only in this kind of transient storage. So the short answer is I have no plans to make immediate use of it. But now that it is out and operating, it's certainly something that will be influenced by future systems designs. There is one potential thing that I'm thinking about, which is more to do with on-chain order matching and that kind of thing. But yeah, the short version is that Carbon was built in such a way so as to not have any dependence on any future upgrades, and I'm very, very happy with the way that it performs without it. If there's gas savings or something that we can get out of future versions of it, then of course we will endeavor to make those happen. But yeah, like I said, I consider this the groundwork to a fully sharded system, and I'm much more looking forward to what the where this technology is headed as it relates to Ethereum mainnet, not necessarily on this upgrade itself.
I understand that. It kind of goes to what Josh was saying earlier also about it affecting more their deployment on Arbitrum. Because although Carbon DeFi, like Bancor has not deployed Carbon DeFi on any layer twos, it has been licensed to Velocimeter, in the form of graphene, right? Graphene is now live on Base and Phantom. So this will significantly affect at least their deployment on Base.
Yes, correct. And Arbitrum.
Yeah.
Are any of the other L2s, like I heard something about there's an issue that like the L2s need to have upgradability in order to obviously upgrade to.
There was
all upgradable
preparation,
anyway.
yeah.
So is there any that are falling short of this?
They're all upgradable. I mean, if all of the layer twos have to be upgradable, is the I don't think there's such thing as an immutably deployed layer two, and there never will be. So the main issue isn't necessarily about upgradability, but preparedness. So I think, and I'm not gonna, this isn't speaking ill of anyone, and I don't want anyone to think I'm being critical of it. But there was a layer two that was unprepared for the upgrade, and so they stopped producing blocks for a little while. I think it's up and running again now. But yeah, it's got nothing to do with upgradability necessarily. More like just a lack of awareness or preparedness for the hard fork.
Ceazor, that answered. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Like I'm a little bit undereducated on it to really give good answers. Like all I know is what I've pretty much said, and now what you guys have shared with me. I don't really. You did mention, like you did talk a little bit about that this upgrade is not like for L2s, and it's for sharding, right? So how would you vision, like, let's say there were no L2s, how would you envision that this would create a better user experience for the average user if there was only Ethereum?
That was something I was asking about earlier too. Is this actually is your average user on the L2s? Are they on Ethereum? Is this upgrade, I know it affects Ethereum mainnet, just not in the way that everybody really wants, like your average user really wants it to, that's having more of that effect on the L2. So I have the same question mark.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point that I made about the way that it's marketed. That they were going to do this no matter what, and if there were no layer twos, they wouldn't have marketed it as being a layer two fix. It would be marketed in some other way, but it doesn't matter, right? You need to separate out the marketing, like whatever the narrative is or the story that's being told, from what it actually is. And what it is a first architecture upgrade en route to Ethereum sharding. So it was never supposed to be something that benefits users. It's a generic protocol upgrade for the Ethereum network. It's not like they're addressing a specific pain point or something that people are asking for, and that's not what it's motivated by. It's motivated by a much grander vision for how Ethereum should operate. And this is the necessary first step in that direction. Even if it doesn't impact a single user, they would still do it, and they should do it.
But like, sorry, would it like potentially be a step towards the idea of Ethereum becoming so cheap that L2s are irrelevant?
That is what this is a step towards. Like, I think when Ethereum is properly sharded, that is what will alleviate the congestion on the network that drives fees up. But as one of the things, like as Josh was saying prior to our call, I think that there will be other solutions to gas costs. So what Josh was talking about, I can't remember if he actually said it on the call or if it was just prior to the call, There's things like execution tickets and gas futures markets and things like that. Like there are things coming that will that are very interesting, and I think will address at least some of the predictability in gas prices and transaction execution. But yeah, the point that I'm making is that yeah, like if you wanted lower gas prices on Ethereum and you wanted Ethereum layer 1 to be legitimately scalable, then this is the you know, this should be the signal that this is actually likely to happen. Remember that, you know, when I joined the space, Ethereum sharding was the thing that was like a very hypothetical, you know, deeply theoretical discussion, because they knew what they wanted to do but had no idea how to do it. And the layer 2s were a compromise, and I think people forget that. Like the idea wasn't necessarily that layer 2s on Ethereum is going to be how Ethereum permanently scales. It's a temporary solution until Ethereum shards. So yeah, it could be that that a fully sharded Ethereum will no longer need layer 2s.
Yeah, it's a bit.
Ecosystems are going to be significantly enough entrenched that the layer 2s will persist anyway. There's no reason why you have to go one way or the other. Like, you know, you guys know I'm a pragmatist. I see a version of the, you know, Ethereum's blockchain universe existing where rollups and you know, and the layer 2 infrastructure coexists alongside you know, a sharded Ethereum mainnet. I don't think that it needs to be one or the other. I would prefer to have both. Having redundancy built into the system is exactly how the US made it to the moon in the first place. So if you know, if we're really serious about Ethereum's security and its scalability, I would prefer scalable redundancies as well. If that means having an Ethereum mainnet that's super fast and super cheap to use, as well as layer 2s built on top of it that are also super fast and super cheap to use, then we should celebrate that. I don't think it's a threat to the L2 ecosystem at all.
Yeah, I think like the L2 ecosystems are great, and obviously I am highly interacting with them. I interact with them every single day, and I jump all over the place as much as I possibly can without losing, you know, too much money. And of course I lose some to bridging and stuff like that, but it would be fantastic if there was just one, right? Like if I could just do everything I need to do.
Ethereum will always be the mothership.
Yeah,
Ethereum will always be the mothership.
Yeah,
and
totally.
that's okay. But you know, I don't see a version of the future where Ethereum is just is so attractive that the layer 2s become obsolete. I just don't see it, and there are lots of reasons for that, because the technology all improves at roughly the same rate. And so even if, you know, like even consider Solana, right? A blockchain that should have absolutely no purpose for a layer 2, right? That's built to be scalable from the ground up, and it has layer 2s. You know, like it's got an EVM compatibility layer, and there, you know, there are people that are looking at building more complicated layer 2 infrastructure on top of it. So it has it would be nice to have everything on like a single chain. And it solves some problems with things like liquidity fragmentation and that kind of thing. But don't make the mistake of thinking that, you know, convenience is necessarily, even, you know, let's talk about predominantly financial use cases. That kind of convenience and efficiency doesn't necessarily mean a more healthy marketplace. You kind of, in a way, and this is one of the things that I've spoken about in these debates before, you want some fragmentation. You want a little bit of friction in the system so that there's always a gradient for work to get done over. If all of DeFi lived exclusively on Ethereum mainnet and we didn't have, you know, bridging and other things to kind of slow down some of these processes, then the market would look very, very different. And I don't think it would be different in a better way. I think that it would be, you know, it would, you know, hyper efficient systems are generally very boring. There's no opportunity anywhere, and it's a race to the bottom. by having, by separating some of these systems out and having them work independently. It actually adds a little bit of inefficiency into the system, and that's where opportunity thrives. So yeah, I think that even the financial purists on blockchains should not wish for everything just to return to the home base. The layer 2 infrastructure has done enormous good for DeFi, not just because the transaction costs are cheaper on some of those layer 2s, but because they cultivate new opportunities for people to that incentivize more participation in the system. So yeah, it's not. Yeah, I don't think that a fully sharded Ethereum will obsolete any of the layer 2s, none of them, and I don't wish for it to do that either.
Do you think that this will affect, like we had previously spoken with Crypto Choreo, for example, about how Bitcoin DeFi, it was, I don't know if it still is one of the leading, but it was certainly one of the leading narratives over the last couple of months. Do you think that this will have an impact on that?
No,
and
Bitcoin is completely like, okay, like you can.
I know the upgrade won't affect it, but I mean, in terms of, projects building and things of that sort, users.
The short answer is no. Like, I don't think that it has. Not only is it, not only does it not have any like relevance to Bitcoin and the way that Bitcoin operates, but it also, I don't think will have any influence on it. The the Bitcoin DeFi narratives and things is because Bitcoin has a really terrific brand, and people now know how to, or at least they're convinced that they know how to, and I believe them. Basically process how to build an L2 infrastructure that resembles Ethereum's. Let's just put it that way. And that's beneficial because, Bitcoin has a very, a very narrow use case, which, the blockchain itself can only send Bitcoin to people. Of course, we now know during the Sedgwick process, you can process and publish arbitrary data, which is how they've managed their sort of NFT program and that kind of thing. But it's still very limited. And so having something that's built on top of Bitcoin, that's its own blockchain, maybe, even an EVM blockchain that allows for more complex, smart contracts to exist, but is borrowing from the brand of Bitcoin, like that's really the thing that makes it exciting. And, in terms of technology, it's not all that, I don't want to say it's not impressive, but people work very, very hard on these things. But in a way, it's impressive because they're figuring out how to do it with such a limited blockchain. But yeah, for blobs and stuff, like forget it. That's so far out of Bitcoin's purview. It's just never going to happen. Some of those layer 2s might decide to inherit some of that infrastructure, but again, the reason for the Bitcoin DeFi narrative isn't because the technology is better. It's because the branding is better. So yeah, I don't even think that there will be any motivation to do this kind of thing.
I can definitely see like a future, like in the very near future, a wave of blob narrated like projects. Like, oh, this token's gonna use blobs, so send us to like 500 million market cap. And like I can see this happening in like a month or so. Someone will just be like, oh, here's a new like ERC standard that uses blobs, even if it's like pointless. It's still gonna happen. You know what I mean? It's just someone's gonna figure out some way to do it, and then it's just gonna get chilled like crazy, and it's gonna be all over. So I think that's kind of what I understood from your question is, will the builders stop building on the Bitcoin DeFi, and then the narrative will switch to the Dencun narrative? This is kind of what I understood what your question meant. Like, is this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both, really. If it's going to offer so much more on both sides, what is the incentive for going elsewhere? But Mark is right. I mean, it does have you have your loyalists, right? And I think this was something I was thinking when you were asking Mark about, will it make the L2s obsolete? You know, you do have your loyalists. You have that, you built that strong community. And I think it was Ethereum for so long, but it was prohibitive, right? The gas prices and everything else. And so you kind of ventured out and you found this user experience that you genuinely enjoy. It's simple, it's less expensive. Now it's 10 to 100 times less expensive, you know, so what is the incentive for going back?
Yeah,
or
and the other
for
thing,
going elsewhere?
and tokens, right? This is what I was saying, like sort of jokingly at the
Yeah.
beginning, like before the call. But yeah, like one of the main use cases of a layer 2 now is to launch a new token. And you know, it has an implicit use case, and it tends to subvert, at least for now, a lot of the securities offerings, accusations, and things like that, because it has people buy it for use as a gas token and that kind of thing. So yeah, I do not see anything slowing down the layer 2 development. I don't think that the Dencun upgrade will do anything to thwart that. In fact, if anything, like we've already observed, it's going to support it because it makes transactions that much cheaper. But yeah, even when Ethereum continues to improve, I don't see any of that slowing down. I think having a bunch of layer 2s is totally fine. It might be inconvenient at the moment because there's no way to sort of aggregate chains together very easily, but we know that there are extremely clever wallet products being developed that know how to that are looking to sort of obfuscate the let's say the plethora of different chains that one might interact with. There are also very excellent, like, so some of the best teams that I've met in the sort of the layer 2 space are also looking at ways that you can communicate between layer 2s. Hop is one that comes to memory from I mean, I haven't spoken to them in a couple of years, but extremely gifted and talented engineers there that don't even care. Like, their perspective is that they don't even care that they have to process transactions across different chains, whether they be layer 1s, layer 2s, or whatever. So yeah, we can still, you can still achieve something that looks like, from the user experience perspective, using a single chain with clever engineering and better programming. And I still think that will happen. It has to, and eventually it has to happen. But that doesn't mean that there has to be one chain. You can still have many different chains operating concurrently and still achieve something like that. And I think that that's what the market is going to demand one way or another.
Well, it's pretty
Yeah.
standard now. Like, if you're a substantial liquidity provider of significant size, then most of them demand that they get a better than like a normal APR or return on their liquidity than if they just anonymously provide liquidity to places. So these L2s have the ability to issue tokens to those people in that manner. So that's not something I can see Ethereum being able to do, especially in a like kind of under the table type deal, right? Like, it would have to be completely transparent, I would think. I'm not exactly sure, because I don't know how the Ethereum Foundation supports projects and how transparent they are on that. But I can totally see, like, one of these L2s, even if they're using ETH as gas as opposed to their native some token, like just for an example, like OP or Arbitrum, they're still using ETH as gas, but they have this other token that they minted, that they can mint out of thin air, and they can use those to further incentivize liquidity providers as well as projects in the form of grants. Like, I don't know of, I've never heard of any project since I've been in DeFi getting a grant from Ethereum to deploy to Ethereum, whereas it's quite common on all of these L2s. So it allows for this, like, experimental innovation, engine that pushes engineers to come up with new ideas and then to deploy them to these L2s. So it very much becomes like a research and development phase, but like a playground for this kind of innovation.
Right. No, I can see that. We see the rounds of grants and things being given out, and I think Arbitrum just had their second round. Nice to hear it from your perspective, Mark. So thank you. And Ceazor, thanks for asking your questions also, because
I've got one more actually. Yeah. Do all of like say all these roll-ups, right? They want to use blobs. Do they all get their own blob? Like, do they all just like, oh, this is the optimism blob?
No, well, that's a blob is not in the way that I think you're asking. It's just that the EVM previously had no way to handle that kind of data type, and so no, it's not like there's a separate part of the blockchain or the separate part of the EVM and everyone gets their own piece. It's just data that goes there. So they will be used. They might each have like hundreds of blobs that they're using or thousands of blobs that they're using concurrently. It's just it's just consider a part of a computer system that wasn't there before. It's like installing RAM for the first time or something like that. It's generic. It's not you don't own a blob. It's something that the EVM can handle now that it couldn't handle before.
So Arbitrum and Optimism, for example, will be, or possibly could be, writing to the same blob.
No. I mean the blob. No. Like the blob will be something that you create and the smart contract will use. But if I'm using a blob, for data storage, it's not like someone else can write that blob. The blob will know who has permissions to edit it and that kind of thing.
Okay, I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's just a list, like. I mean, it's not a list, but you know what I mean. If you're a Python programmer or something, it's like there were lists and there were tuples, and now there's dictionaries. A blob is just that. It's just like another data type that now the EVM knows about that it didn't know about before.
Okay, I see. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's pretty much it. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the answers, man. I was gonna say you can just be a little bit more degen, right? Because you don't have to worry too much about paying $1 to rebalance or something like this, right?
Yeah.
There is one thing we should probably say. Like, I just want to mention to you guys, if you guys are borrowing USDC anyway, you should probably double check that. USDC APRs are skyrocketing, like 80%, 90%, and some more. So like anywhere you've borrowed USDC, you should probably go check it if you haven't yet. Even on Mantle, like it's like even small places where there's USDC sitting there to be borrowed, it's been borrowed right up. So yeah, just double check your CDPs if you're borrowing USDC and see if it makes sense to repay it or continue to pay that high interest.
Thanks, Ceazor. I love your tips. I love it. You're all over. You've got feelers all over the place. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah. I guess that's it, guys.
Mark, Ceazor, thank you guys so much. I know Josh had to jump, but I want to give him a thank you also. We will be live tomorrow with Michael Kong, the CEO, CIO of Phantom Foundation, speaking about their Sonic upgrade, along with Bancor Technologies going live on Phantom. And that includes the smart contracts powering Carbon DeFi. That was a deployment we were speaking about earlier. Velocimeter's deployment called Graphene is now live on Phantom, along with Bancor's ARB Fastlane. So we will hopefully catch all of you guys tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Ceazor.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks.